Ladies and gentlemen, I am back from Europe. I was in Portugal for like a month with my wife, visiting her family. My friend Exhale is here as usual. We tend to just do these sporadically whenever we have time, and a lot of stupid shit to say, which piles up very quickly. But
Yeah.
I think we'll get through it.
I think there's plenty.
Oh yeah. Apparently, like I can't leave the goddamn country for 3 weeks without you fucking apes making an interesting decision on the behalf of the rest of us. Thank you. However, I did want to have a mild thought experiment when it comes to that. Just for a second here, and I'm going to include Chris in that. When is the last time you've looked at or even thought about or considered the price of eggs and gas before you bought them? Have you done that recently?
No.
No.
I find it exhausting to get mad about shit like that. Because the only way that shit really affects you is if you have, like, 4, 5, 6 kids, in which in that place it's like you did it to yourself.
Well, and that's where I'm going with this, because I was going to say, like, are you, are you worrying, like, when you go and get gas in that week before you take a month off of your job with your wife to go, like, slum it around Europe and come back? Are you really looking at the price?
Well, am I mean to say that, like, it seems like the caricature of the people that are so mad about that are the people that make the poor choice to have, like, 9 kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's the people that make the poor choice to, I'm going to bitch about gas, but I absolutely needed to buy this F-250 dually that's going to just suck, half a fucking oil rig every time I go to the pump.
That's kind of just what I wanted to say, because there might be pictures of me wearing a shirt that says communist while I wave guns around, floating around on the internet and stuff. So people may see me as sort of partisan in some of my thoughts on things. But also...
Like, communists like guns, too.
Well, if you go far enough left, you get them back, is the thing. But here's the real thing. I don't know that I even did that. I just...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It turns out extremism and weapons are somewhat tied ideologically to one another. Like, who would have guessed that that's the case? But that's not actually me. I actually just have, like, no real, like... And I'm going to illustrate that point thus. There's stuff that I hate to see, but I'm just screwing around. If you've ever watched the show Futurama, there's a part where they kind of is revealed in, like, the later seasons that if Bender the robot ever dies, his data immediately is backed up, and they just make a new one. And they're like, "Well, wait a minute. How come every time that, like, we were in mortal danger, you were screaming and freaking out? If it wouldn't affect you, and you would just immediately be rebooted into a new robot or whatever?" And he's like, "I never said I wasn't a drama queen." And that's exactly how it is with me now at this point. I think I used to have skin in the game, but now. Yeah, I like to complain about stuff that I think is stupid, but it's not, and that's why I asked Chris this, because same with me.
That's the last American right that's worth anything.
It really is, yeah. But literally nothing. Okay, here's what happened. Everybody was like, gas and eggs are expensive. And I was like, are they? I hadn't paid any attention. I just bought a new car that takes 10 times as much gas as my old Prius, and, like, I don't care about that. It all takes, you have to put the 93 in it too. That's the minimum. And, like, so I did that going, I don't think I'm going to bitch about, now it's not a giant truck. I think at a certain point, but I'm not going to do that. So, like, it's like I wasn't paying any attention to how much gas or eggs were.
Also weird how many people that bitch about the gas price are not the type of people that want to sell their truck for a Prius.
Or not the kind of people that want the government to control everything and artificially limit, like, businesses and lower the prices and stuff like that, because I believe that is some form of socialist, whatever, that would actually make things better for everybody, but nobody wants that. However, the same people are like, electing a certain president will actually cause these things to get cheaper fucking somehow, which I don't know. But here's the great thing. No. I would just buy groceries and be like, I think it was like $100 more expensive than it used to be from Costco, or maybe that's because we were going somewhere else, or maybe, I don't know, who gives a shit. And I immediately, like, stopped thinking about it, and, like, I don't even look at the gas. I just, like, that's the 93. That's what goes in the fucking sports modded Mini. Yep. whatever. Then everyone elects a president who they're like, it's going to be cheaper. Then immediately it's like, we're going to do a bunch of stuff that's going to make it more expensive, which was obvious to most of us the whole time. But here's the other thing. None of that will affect Chris or I at all. But we're still going to bitch about it because you're correct. That is exactly our right as an American. Like, I'm like, okay, like, the problem didn't affect me. I knew the solution wasn't what everybody did. Everybody did it anyway, and that won't affect me either, but it will affect them. And that's funny and worth pointing out, I think.
You know what I like, John? I like lower-priced goods. You know what I don't like? Taxes. Mm-hmm. You know what I really like is the idea that adding a 25% tax on everything coming into America is going to get me that cheaper good that I want. It's really, really like a lot of mental gymnastics there to wrap your brain around.
Oh, there is no gymnastics if you just don't understand how it works at all. Then you just go, this is going to happen, and then you just start a fight at Thanksgiving about something.
People that couldn't even jump up on the monkey bars as a kid are trying to just do the fucking Olympics of ridiculousness.
I think it's a few people that might have fallen off the monkey bars. Like that's that might be some of it. But yeah, but that's just it. Like I was seeing numbers that are like it could cost average families up to $900 a year, and I'm like, oh my god, like that's like to me that's again, it's mildly annoying, but only to like think about. Not even really like, I'm not saying that either of us are, like, extremely wealthy. I think that just a lot of you don't realize how poor you are. Like, that's the thing. It's like, all we are is not poor. That's it. Like, it's not like we're not flying to Europe private. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to, like, move over there and just be like, I'm going to live off my investments. Like, that would be amazing because everything's a little cheaper in like, Portugal. But, yeah, I can't actually just up and do that right now. I'm not, I'm a shrewd guy. And we're both like, guys that go to work every day and do good things. But it's like when you think about how like everyone is like, oh my God, like there's like a meme I used to see shared around that really summed this up where it was like kind of an anti-welfare, or I don't know what the point of it was, probably anti-black, but like it would just be a picture of a full refrigerator full of, by the way, garbage, like Eggo waffles and all this horse shit that you shouldn't be eating. And then another pic, and it said like poor person's refrigerator, and then it says like middle class person's refrigerator, and it's like empty, because they don't get handouts. And I'm like, guess what? You're not middle class. Your refrigerator's empty. If you're middle class, here's how it goes. You go to the grocery store and buy whatever you want, and then sometimes you complain about that it's expensive, and then you go out for tacos and margaritas later, and that's it. Like, that's what being middle class actually is. And if you do have like 3 kids, it's like you have to make more to be middle class or whatever. But but some people I literally know, multiple, I mean, I know some very wealthy people that have a couple of kids, but like, I have friends that are like, they kind of make a little bit more than me and Chris, but by doing something a little less interesting. It's like they're doing like high level weird IT stuff, so they're like blew past the 6-figure threshold a while ago, and they kind of need to be there because they have to have a certain lifestyle. But they're doing great. It's like let's go, let's take a trip to Jamaica. Like it's like that's if you're leaving the country to go screw around, and then you come home and it's basically like nothing has changed in your life. Like you're like, okay, like we better get the cheaper macaroni. This fucking like then. None of that is going to affect you. It's like, now there's plenty of things that I don't like about what's going on, and a lot of it is kind of like the weird, backlash to this imaginary culture war thing. It's just like, it's going to get ugly for people who, that I know and that I like, and that it, makes me sad. It's like, I don't want anything happening to any of the trans people that I know, or any of the gay people I know, or anything like that. Like, and I don't want that, and I don't like that. And that's like something that is concerning. Yeah. But the weird part about the whole thing is that everyone goes, oh no, that's not really it though. It's like we were just doing it because of the economy, and I'm like, that is the funniest thing you've ever said. Like, you're just going to tank it on the behest of these weird oligarchs and you're doing it because you want to teach some people that barely exist a lesson. Yeah. You want to make sure that the kind of people that you've never met in your fucking life by the design of living somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, like. You want to make sure that like they're just out of your way, even though you don't know any, and like or that you want to force Disney to put more white people back into its movies. Like, I don't know what the fuck you're even interested in seeing happen.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's gross. And it's like, some of you definitely know better with the economic thing, which I find irksome. I guess, because I'm like, be honest, be awful, just be a terrible person.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Fox News did a masterful job over the past, 3 or 4 years of making everybody everywhere think that a few random select college kids that are, first off, young and allowed to be wrong sometimes.
And weird.
Yeah, and weird.
Because they're going to be weird. Everyone was weird.
Yeah.
We didn't have Twitter or whatever, though. So that's... But your weirdness was kept to yourself more, but the idea that it's spreading is, you just hear... Everyone's awkward phase is out there for the world to see now.
But in my crazy... They did a masterful job of, when you see, a meme of, a college protester with the purple hair or whatever else, and they're screaming something, got their sign, it's like, Fox News did a masterful job of making everybody think that that's every Democrat all the time, anywhere, ever.
Yeah, and that any of that will affect their life in any fucking calculable way.
For sure won't.
No, the boogie thems are not coming to get you. That is not a fucking thing. And I'll say this, I mean, everyone, you've heard me have my stance on this. I'm like, it's everyone can just do whatever they want. It's not affecting anyone the way they imagine it's going to. It is annoying. I'm not going to virtue signal or whatever people say. I'm not going to be like, and they have every right to make us all take them very seriously. No, they don't. We shouldn't be building policy that attacks people like that, who also just, by the way, barely exist in real day-to-day life or whatever. Yeah. There's just people out there on the internet that Fox News wants everyone to be afraid of. But I'm like, no, Fox News is correct that when you're dealing with someone who's just, when you introduce your wife to them, they kind of go, and this is my partner, you need this, blah, blah, blah. And it's just two fucking straight people. And you're like, oh, enough. Yeah. But I'm not going to go, well, so I'm voting for a deranged syphilitic fascist to be, because I felt that interaction at this weird party, in Minneapolis where I live was worth rolling my eyes at a little bit or whatever. And it's but no, here's what I did about it. I rolled my eyes and then, didn't vote for the guy who was flushing secret documents down his toilet.
Do you think he does have syphilis?
I don't know what his problem is, aside from that he's incredibly old, which now is not a fucking issue anymore, randomly.
No.
He's currently... Bill Clinton was the president in the early to mid 90s, and Trump is right now older than Bill Clinton still. He's just fucking old and weird and everything. I don't need to sit here. You all know what the deal is. And it's very if you go on Reddit or somewhere and someone's the problem is you won't just sit down and listen, or you take all these things out of context, and they're like, okay, well, what out of context? And they'll either not respond to that or post something and be like, yeah, the rest of what he was saying, I went and watched the video. I was a guy in the middle, but then I was like, oh, this seems a little, maybe they're kind of trying to tar and feather this guy. Then I went and watched it. I'm like, yeah, okay, so I as if everyone's afraid to do it. I'm like, okay, let me go take a look at this. And I'm like, okay, this is actually all of what he said, and it's terrifying. What the fuck are you even, and then they're the comment gets deleted. I'm like, oh, you're a bot, or you're but there's a very or a real person that's just a fucking asshole. There's such what I want, and I think I've said this before, I want everyone to be themselves. Now that includes all the weird blue-haired college kids, but that also includes just nasty, ignorant, gross weirdos. Just be I'm so tired of so if you're a young guy, it's you want to, bone all the chicks or whatever. And it's but people will kind of be like, well, don't do that. So you got to, well, no, see, we're in a polycule. So it's this modern, progressive, queer. No, it isn't. Just be a piece of shit and go I'm kind of 22 and I sort of want to fuck all the hot chicks at this thing. And eventually they're all going to talk to each other. And it's going to turn into a huge blowout. Yeah. But we didn't try to turn it into this weird community or whatever. And it's that person should be themselves. And then when you go, I'm voting for economic reasons, just be no, I watch weird propaganda all day. I hate fucking everybody, and I've never met any of these people, but you know what? I just don't want them to exist, so I voted for the thing that's a nightmare because fuck you. It's if everyone would do that, I think I'd be a little less shitty about it. I'd be okay, good for you.
Well, first off,
be honest.
Humans everywhere should never not admit that they're gross.
Yeah.
Every human everywhere is gross.
We are gross, and we all know it.
And it's, to your point, it's almost more insulting when you pretend to not be gross.
Especially when you could see right the fuck through it, too. It's just like, don't insult my intelligence, you fucking pig. Come roll in the mud with me.
And to get to the point you were just saying, too, is, like, that's one of the things that has kind of bothered me with the way that Trump gets handled is, like, our sentiments about Trump are very much the same, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so much shit that he says all the time that is very clearly, to your point, like, no, I don't need context. I don't need, like, I mean, and then even when you do listen for it, it's like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what he's getting at.
Yeah.
My thing is, like, that kind of pisses me off is, like, well, then why do you need to, like I almost feel like the left sometimes, like, makes shit up about him.
Yeah, I hate that, too.
And I hate that just because it's like...
Just show the real stuff.
Yeah, you don't need to do that, for one. And then for two, he gets away with so much because you just make up some inconsequential thing about him that doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't make him not a giant fucking turd in the toilet that we call America or whatever but, like... I don't know. It just, like, it bothers me because then that's how you get the QAnons and the people that are just like, yep, see, it's just everything that anybody says about him is just made up by George Soros.
And, don't give him that inch.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's just like, it gives lazy people that don't want to, like, do any research a reason to not do that.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I get it. It's just, this is how it is. Yeah, it's like making a documentary about John Wayne Gacy and being like, this isn't interesting enough. Let's also say that he was, like, not paying his taxes. Like, what? And it's just completely not true. It's like, they found, like, 30 dead kids under his house, and you're like, you know what else?
He lied about being the city water commissioner.
Yeah! Like, he fucking did a mail-in ballot for someone that wasn't real. It's like, okay, don't do that. Like, he's already, like, a child rapist murderer clown. Yeah. Like, what do you got to add to that? And, like, John Wayne Gacy and Donald Trump wear the exact same amount of makeup. Yeah. But, I mean, they do. There's just different things about them that are sort of icky.
Well, and do you think that there was people that voted for Trump this time who, I don't want to say ignored some of the stuff that you're saying, although there was a lot of that.
Oh, baby, they did.
But also people that just got so fed up with, like, some of the made-up shit that they were just like, you know what? I'm just exhausted with all of this. And so I don't want to do the research to find out if all of this shit is a witch hunt, but it just feels like it is. So fuck it, I'm just voting for him. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's, like, overcomplicating it, but...
I feel, though, that's, like, I think that, once again, is something that people kind of say. And like, I think they're full of shit. Because there's this weird idea that, like, the default winners of everything have to be the crazy Christian Republican people. Yeah. And it's like, if you don't try hard enough, they win automatically. What the hell is that? And I mean, if you think about it hard enough, you can't go back. You can't be like, well, this wasn't awesome enough, so it'd be like being like, oops, like, I made pancakes and we have syrup, but we're all out of butter, and the pancakes have been sitting there for a second. It's like, well, then instead, I'm going to eat a bucket of, like, rotten milk and broken glass because, I mean, the pancakes are a little old. Like, they got kind of cold. I'm not microwaving them. Ick, what is this? Fucking hell? No, I'm going to eat this bucket of dead flies that I found in the backyard. Like, that's what I have to do. Yep. The pancakes aren't good enough. Why are we like that? And I'm like, no one's doing that. Everyone is an asshole, and they want all these bad things to happen that they've been propagandized to believe to people that, again, hardly even exist or whatever. And they're like, that's an excuse that I don't think anyone even believes about themselves. They just say that online so people don't drag them. It's like, no, well, it just wasn't my thing. It's like, yeah. You want some sort of weird, like, thing to happen where women can't work anymore, and by the way, that will exactly chop the economy in half. Do you think, it's like, some people have said that the fact that, like, in families, both people are kind of expected to work now, that's kind of like part of how they've gotten away with paying everyone less. It's like, well, I mean, you gotta have, and I actually don't believe that, but let's just say that that's true. And if you were to somehow, like, turn the clock back to that, do you think everyone's getting a raise? No, everyone gets a bigger yacht, and then that's it. You're still getting paid the same. But then there's also, like, half the buying power in the country. So beyond that, the bottom just falls out of everything. Yeah. So it's like the imaginary version doesn't work, and the real version doesn't work. And somehow you believe that this is all going to happen, and it's going to be great. And by the way, also, none of it will. None of this shit. Because I'm not worried in the least. Because I feel bad about some stuff, but nothing's going to happen to me. And also, maybe nothing's going to happen at all because, boy, is this some incompetence. I mean, if you think about, like, the people that he's putting in charge of other stuff, it's like, oh, yeah, you really think they're going to be able to, like, ram through Congress? And it's just like, yeah, we're like this business that uses like all illegal immigrants who like makes like $1 billion is just gonna like give them up to be like, none of that's gonna. We're gonna deport everyone. It's like, no, you're not. This is just gonna be a big gridlocked dumpster fire. It's gonna be a joke like last time, except for just without COVID to sort of like focus on or whatever. At least I fucking hope, because I'm not putting up with that again. As much as I didn't like people that kind of rallied against it last time, I'm like, it didn't get handled well enough. I'm just going outside. Like, just shut up. Like, people are going to die, but I think, when we get into a nuclear war with somebody, they're going to die anyway. So what am I fucking sitting here inside for?
Well, you did just make me think a second ago that I need to amend the statement from earlier that to anybody out there listening, if you're a human being, you are gross and also full of shit.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. You're full of shit.
You're gross and you're full of shit about it.
You're full of shit.
You're full of shit about being gross. And that's the absolute, like...
Yep.
It's got to be, maybe now that I'm old, because 44 is old, that I think it's my least favorite thing about everybody. Because it kind of affects me. It's like... When I tell a story about how, like, I one time paid for drugs by letting the hot girl that sold them to me blow me, like, that's like an existence you can live. It's like, learn to tell a joke, pick up a keyboard or a guitar. I don't know, man. Like, it's definitely possible. And living in that weird frictionless, but most people would just be like, well, that's fucked up and disgusting. It's like, you would do that if you could so fucking fast it would make your head spin. You would do it with someone way less hot, probably while you're also in a relationship, and shame on you. Like, I have fucking rules here, and like, that I abide by and helped to build. Like, it's a thing that all works out. But you're like, oh, ew. It's like, you can't act like that. It's like, you would sell your grandmother to human traffickers if you were allowed to behave like Chris and I have for 48 hours. Like, are you kidding me? Get the fuck out of here with that. And I mean, like, I'm sure there's some, like...
Because they're full of shit.
Yeah, and I don't care who you are. It's like, well, we're two kind of like quiet, bookish lesbians, and we don't think about... You think about murdering people every day, especially because, like, your family was shitty to you. It's like, get out of here. You think all kinds of rotten stuff, and what you do is you go, I think that, and I would do it if I could get away with it, but it's a bad idea, so I won't. You don't go... Well, that's preposterous. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, you would be so happy if Trump had gotten shot in the face by that guy. And like, it's like, I wouldn't be celebrating because I think there'd be some fallout, although I don't think it's as bad as everybody thinks it would be. I don't care if they do or don't kill that guy. I kind of agree. And occasionally we do agree with Alex Jones on this podcast. Not often. But when he's like, oh, they're definitely... We've talked about it before. They're going to kill that guy. Probably before he gets sworn in. Like, that's probably going to happen. And, like, I don't want them to, and I don't not want them to. Like, I just don't really care. I'm only interested in how they're going to do it.
Yep.
That's the part that's fun. I'm putting out a disclaimer here, because I am a piece of shit, but I'm not, like, rooting for this. Also because I know it wouldn't solve anything. It's like, J.D. Vance is like the kid from The Omen when he grows up to be a politician. Like, I think that he would just be in charge. Like, there's nothing great about that. But, like, it will just be an interesting thing that happens. And if you don't mind, and I know I've been just going off. I haven't let you talk much on this, and I'm sorry. But I would like to share with you my theory on how they're going to assassinate Trump. And if you would do me the favor
please.
Of, once I'm done, either critique it a little bit or give me your own thoughts on what they might do. I just kind of think they're not going to shoot him. But here's what I think.
Okay.
I think that Elon Musk is like a Charles Manson grade, like CIA MK Ultra fucking asset guy.
I love
because
it already.
They've been doing that shit, like fucking with Jack Ruby and like for years. Like that was in the 60s. That's what, like, Midnight Climax, they're trying to control people's minds with LSD and stuff. Do you think they just stopped doing shit like that? Like, you know what? This is a little too much.
I think they said they stopped.
I think they say a lot of things, and like that's their job. They're the CIA. Like we've got to do it before too, where people have yelled at me. It's like the CIA only acts abroad. They don't do anything in our country. And I'm like, and you believe that because that's what they say they do and don't do? It's like they literally like like use cocaine to pay for like rocket launchers to overthrow countries so like bananas go down by 5 cents? Do you really think that they're like the most honest, straightforward fucking people? No.
Yeah.
And I would just love to be a weird asset for them. Call me.
The banana thing's weird too, because there have been several authoritarian leaders in South and Central America that
Banana republics
died in plane crashes just for, well, we just really, really needed those mangoes just a little bit cheaper.
By the way, isn't it so American that it's like we all know that happened, and to show our outrage, we named a store in the mall after Banana Republic. Like, it's just a place where you could buy khaki pants and like white shirts. It's like, yeah, like, you know, like, remember when the CIA installed a bunch of Banana Republics and killed fucking thousands of people so bananas would be cheaper?
How can you not see that and not love capitalism?
That's why I'm here for now still, because I do appreciate the skills, you know, like,
yeah.
I look, okay, wait, let me get back.
I got you off on a tip about the Banana Republic. We were talking about Trump.
Elon Musk being a CIA sleeper agent guy. So, okay.
I'm here for that.
He's absolutely like I've gotten and done ketamine infusions, but I know that he's clearly like it openly admits that he's doing them the way that like Michael Jackson was doing propofol or whatever. And it's like, it is a psychedelic. And I mean, psychedelics are an important thing that open your mind and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. To be one of those people that just like takes acid every day for like in summer school or whatever, it's like, how are those kids doing right now? If you're like in your 30s or 40s, are they alive? Because I doubt it. Our good friend Jake knows more than one person that like ate like enough acid for like 50 people and were just weird forever after it and eventually like blew their head off in a bathtub. It's like, yeah, you can't, like, you can rattle your brain, but you cannot just burn it all down to having one last marble that you're just gambling with. That is just a fucking mistake. And so, shouts out to Jake for saying that he's like, I can't do psychedelics anymore because I got one marble left and I can't lose that fucker. Like, that's smart. And so, like, and funny, a funny way to put it. But so, okay, so it's like Elon Musk is clearly already that, you know, like he's got, you know, Trump's got weird people in his orbit, but like, this guy, and everyone's like, oh, he weaponized Twitter to try to get into like, and it's like, maybe he did, but it's starting to feel like this isn't something that just one random rich guy would do anymore. It's starting to have those hoof prints of we're sort of moving things, because they're like, whether Trump wins or loses, he's a problem forever. But then just kind of hunting him down as a private citizen, it's like, that doesn't prove anything to anybody. That doesn't really accomplish what I think what they're going for here, which, so like, you know, they let all this shit happen so he would win. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Yeah. Why not? And then Elon Musk is like not actually like whoever he was 10 years ago is just gone. Like they fried his brain with drugs or something we don't even know about. Something that in the 60s it was acid. What was that, like 70, 80 years ago? And they've just had all the time in the world to figure this out. Yep. So here is what I think is going to happen. Now, I don't think that Elon is like, at first I thought he was getting really fat on purpose, so eventually he could have an excuse to just strap himself up with dynamite. You know, it's like no one would notice and he's just gonna go blow this whole thing up or whatever. I don't know if they're able to turn him into like a suicide bomber. I think that that's just wishful thinking on my part. Like I don't, because, and again, not because, I just think that would be wild. It's like, how did the president die? It's like, well, this guy that seemed really weird was just allowed on like Air Force One with him and shit, and it just blew it up. Like, and he's so rich, what is he going to let people search him? You know, it's like, no, it's their own. They're like, oh, we don't need to do that. And then everybody blows up. It's like, it feels, but I think it's like getting someone to commit suicide is hard. Like nobody in the JFK thing really killed themselves. They all kind of killed each other and went crazy. Yeah. And so they just locked Charles Manson up in solitary forever and all that shit. But like, so what I think is, you know, phony Stark, Elon Musk is going to get some weird contract to like, come on. And it's fucking, to you know, they're going to like, he's already got those robots that walk around and stuff, right? And like, Predator drones and all that stuff, it's like we're getting involved in these wars that we're probably going to get slightly more dragged into over time. Okay. And it's like, so it's like, okay, well, he's going to get into making like weapons and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, where do the drones come from? Oh, these are Starlink drones now. You know, it's like, oh, cool. And they're going to have a demonstration. It's going to be on TV. Like Trump will be the president, and he's like, Elon's we're adding. You know, we started Space Force, and then now we're gonna have a robot fucking battalion or whatever. And they're in this boardroom, and they're like, all right, like. like here's like a big, it's gonna like walk around. It's meant, it's meant to be kind of intimidating. A drone flying around is so impersonal. This is gonna be this like robot that kind of walks around or whatever, and it has all these guns on it and it yells at people and stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, Trump's like, that's very really scare all those migrants away, and these are gonna defend the border or whatever. And then they're gonna go like, all right, well, here, Trump, you can read this card in Spanish to the robot and watch what it does. And he'd be like, okay, estoy, and the robot's gonna be like, you need to get back to your own country. And they're like, oh, I would probably explain to him in English that you're not really. He's like, hey, I was just tested you out, robot. I'm not really. It's like, your wife is an immigrant. Like, what is it doing right now? And then just like in RoboCop, it's got those things on it, just like, just fucking sprays him into just like paint powder, and everybody's like, oh my god, like the wall behind him is just completely gone up. A few other people catch it, a little bit like that. You're like, what the fuck? And it's like, oh yeah, we kind of like wanted you to do this, and then the CIA kind of put live rounds in the robot because we knew you would do something idiotic, like test it out or whatever. It's like it was supposed to have blanks in it or whatever. We just loaded it, and but no one's gonna come out and say that part. They're just gonna be like, what? He's like, oh, someone else must have put it on. And they're gonna be like, okay, you're going to jail, buddy. You kind of actually killed the president, so that's the end of him, and that's the end of you. And we have the family to deal with. But now sort of hanging over them is like, we now live in a world where we are not safe from being randomly sprayed into fucking liquid by an insane robot. Yeah. And we might start, like, I think that, they let him win, and they want that to happen exactly how it did. So everyone, without having to come out and say it really, everyone kind of just gets the idea of how it is now. It's like, yeah. You think being a mob informant and one day your car blowing up is just like, no. It's like you might get lifted out of your home by a predator drone and just flown to a different country on some island no one knows about. And then that's where you spend the rest of your life having electric needles stuck into you and shit while everyone just goes, I wonder whatever happened to fucking Trump Jr. Like, I don't know. I think he must have like kind of dropped out of the public after his dad was murdered by a robot that his insane friend built in a weird malfunction thing that we secretly think it was Elon, but it was actually the government. So that's what not only I kind of would like to see happen, I explicitly believe it's going to go exactly like that. If it does, I might have to take this podcast down. But, if it doesn't, it'll just be, it'll be what it really is, which is me being silly. And not sharing my beliefs. And I mean, you could get 50% of the way there, and I'd still feel a little weird about how close I was. It's like, oh, it was an accident, and Elon was there. Creepily close to what John Wheeler said, even though it's mostly just that exact scene for RoboCop, but whatever. I do think about RoboCop every day. So if you would care to throw some baseless conspiracy out into the air, like, which I know you may be happy to. Well, what do you feel? How do you think they're going to kill the president?
The thing I wonder with him is, and I truly don't know the answer to this question, is like, after the thing in Butler, does he view the security and the people around him way differently than he did before? I think a lot of smart people would.
Well, yeah. You mean when
I think you know where I'm going.
You mean when I literally had the Secret Service protecting me, and a teenager with like a rifle he got from Walmart blew his fucking ear off, like.
And then I jumped up and made myself potentially an open target again by pumping my fist up, and
which also no one really talks about. It's great photo op, love that for him. He risked the lives of way more other people by doing that than instead of just getting down.
Yeah.
Where he couldn't get shot. It's like, oh yeah, but what? If there's just 10 shooters all of a sudden, you don't know where bullets come from a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That's the problem with them. And there could have been a bunch of people just waiting there. So I'm sorry. Do continue.
But no, I don't know if what you're talking about actually is. It's interesting because of the fact that I don't know that anybody is gonna ever get close to him in a Ronald Reagan type way now.
No.
You know what I mean? Because
or
of that.
Maybe.
Well, but what's interesting is his one thing is he is very, very vain. He likes to be on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Which another thing we can get into later, more shit with aliens is I also have I have a theory about Trump and aliens. I'll get into it.
And I need to hear that, certainly.
But I wonder though with him, it would almost have to be something that played into his vanity, I think, and which is and that's the other theory that I've heard, that this is a little bit different than what you're saying too, is that we've heard a lot of bad things over the last year or two about Boeing. And,
Yeah.
There's a certain guy that you could insulate him with more security. You could make people get less close to him. Are you going to keep him off that plane?
Oh, no.
You going to keep him? Yeah.
And here's the thing about planes and famous people, and that shit sometimes happens.
Yeah. And I don't know, but maybe we're different about this too, but like, and obviously, like jokes aside, I know you don't like actually want this to happen, but
no,
but like,
I mean, unless it's really fun, like my version of it. I mean, like
really funny.
You can't blame if Elon Musk kills Trump with a robot. Like, I mean, come on, that's like proof that we're in a simulation. So it's like, which I believe kind of. So I sort of, it'd be validating. I don't think it'd be good.
No, but that's the thing is like I mean, you kind of intimated that you think that if it happened, like that people would maybe just kind of move in. It's like, I don't know. Like, I mean, we've talked about before on this, like in Minneapolis when the George Floyd stuff happened, it's like, there was a lot of weird unmarked black trucks with blacked out windows driving around. I don't know who the fuck they are, who they were, but I do wonder that, like, because of like what we were talking about a minute ago with like how much he has been just scrutinized, but also the fact of like, we've gone to the point in the media of like actually just making shit up about him that's not even true, when there's like 900 horrible things he says every day. But I wonder like if because so many of those people have checked out of the motel, that like there would be, if something happened to him, this feeling like, one of the first things he said when he ran in 2016, they're trying to take it all away from you. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I just wonder how many people would be right at that point of like, wrongfully thinking that like, oh, this is actually like the proof in the pudding that like our democracy is not real. Like, no matter who we vote for, it's like, it will be who they say it is.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of already is. And we kind of, I think we've already been in a system where, in my opinion, the people at the top, it ends up boiling down to two candidates that are both acceptable for whatever myriad of reasons.
Yeah.
There may be some different reasons for either side, but I don't, And I wonder, too, if that's why there's so much hatred around Trump, is it's like he does do and say awful things that absolutely should be criticized for.
Yeah.
But he is weirdly, like, one of the only candidate in my lifetime that I can think of that it's like, actually the stock market doesn't love him because he's kind of out of his fucking mind. It's like...
Yeah, my crypto shot up like crazy when he won. It's like, I wasn't even watching it on purpose.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I saw that like my fucking stock portfolio had like $5,000 more in it. I was like, oh God, he won, didn't he?
Yeah. And one of the few...
And he did.
I was going to say, too, is one of the few things that...
Poor me.
I agree with him in principle, but he doesn't... I probably is not going to really end up doing this, but like...
He's not going to do
being
anything.
somewhat anti-war, I guess, which is really weird to me. Like... I'm talking on the surface. I'm not saying he's actually... Yeah, that's not at all what I'm saying.
It being the thing that he kind of says... I think he just got lucky, though, that we were only in the middle of, like, stuff that had been going on forever, and it's like... It definitely had all this weird fallout when he pulled the plug on Afghanistan. We just should have never been there, but, like, what are you going to do? But all of the new stuff that happened, it's like, oh, but this shit is still going on.
Yeah.
And that's
But I bring that up in
different.
the sense of, like, I do think there maybe is some truth to the idea that, like, this system that has always put together two candidates that are acceptable to not the American people, but like
the people with all the money,
like BlackRock, Amazon, Walmart, Disney, insert whatever other top fortune. Yes, yeah, and then obviously Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, all these fucking companies. It always whittles down to two candidates that are like acceptable to that establishment, and in reality, it's like Trump, and this is like I think. An endorsement that gets made of him from his people is that like, oh, he kind of bucks that establishment. It's like, yeah, he kind of does, and it's like somehow not in a good way. You know what I mean?
It's a touch chaotic, and he will also. When people are like, he's unbuyable, I'm like, that dude took money from fucking everybody for everything.
I think he's absolutely buyable.
Yeah.
Now you could make an argument. I think that like if somebody gets enough money, they could at least maybe have a little more leverage in terms of like who buys and sells me.
Oh yes, now he has only the worst people buying him. Like only the people with the absolute most money who have gained it by the absolute most human suffering are the only ones who can afford to buy the it's like, oh, great.
But my broader point, which I wonder if you agree with, is like, is it somewhat true that he is a disruptor to that system? However, like, people who love him and voted for that and are like, yeah, he's gonna like fuck up the system. Like, no, you don't. You think you know what it's gonna be like when the system gets fucked up, and you actually have no idea, and it's gonna be really, really, really awful.
Oh yeah. That.
And I'm just talking the economy. Like, forget about any of the social. Those issues all are important, but it's like.
Dude, COVID was the grid stubbing its fucking pinky toe. Yes. And, like, you saw, like, for a second how fucking bad that kind of could and then did get in a way. Like, but it was, like, kind of nothing. But, like, the supply chains get all messed up. By the way, COVID's a really good example, too, of why the tariff thing isn't going to be a very good idea if it actually happens, which it won't, because of ineptitude and a bunch of other things. But, like, hospitals, like, didn't have any medicine. Like, everything came from somewhere else. And they're like, well, okay, well, that should stop being a thing. And it's like, well, okay, that would involve building more stuff here or having some sort of like rule, but like just going like, let's just tariff everything and stop trade immediately. It's like, that is going to fuck everyone so bad.
John, we just went through Black Friday, and if you want to express your God-given right of going in and punching somebody over a $199 TV, you're going to have to accept that is not going to be made in an American factory by somebody getting paid like a wage that like affords you to be able to like, you know, eat food or like have access to clean water. A lot of bad stuff that, you know, we kind of accept every day here because it doesn't happen to Americans. And it's like, okay, well, you can have that TV, but all of a sudden, just like the gas and the food, it's like, oh, well, when it costs $800, well, now I don't want it.
Yeah, well, also
now it's inconvenient to me.
I love the 1-2 punch of going, we think what's going to happen is we're going to like tariff everything, so everyone's going to have to make stuff in America, which I guess, but then it'll be like way more expensive. Yeah. But at the same time, we're going to deport everyone that would work in those TV factories. I'm not putting together a fucking TV, especially under the same sort of like, oh, you actually have to come in here and work like really hard and make a lot of these because, you know, that's how it is in China, so we need the same level of like production or whatever like that. It's like, absolutely goddamn not. And I think like a lot of people, even if they are kind of warehousey, sort of, it's like, you're not going to want to do that. Everyone lies about how much they work. Another thing, everyone is full of shit. They're like, I work 60 hours a week. Half the time that's not even true. It's like, well, it's 45, but it's more than 40 because sometimes I got to stay, whatever. And it's like, you're doing like less, like, okay. Like, yeah, sometimes I'll stay a little late because I'm like, probably drinking beer with Derek and then still waiting for, I gotta like wait for an email to come in. I went, I should probably get this before tomorrow and make sure, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, I know that like we have it kind of lucky in our circumstance and still manage to get a ton of shit done anyway. But like, there's so many people that are like, you're there, but you're not really doing anything. If you want all the immigrants to go away and then all the jobs to come back here, it's like, well, then you enjoy actually working every second of a 9-hour day with a bayonet in your back, because like otherwise it's like there's not enough American people to make enough of these TVs, so now they're even more fucking expensive because they're rare and take forever. And it's like, it's the complete. It doesn't really work. Or, well, he's not really going to deport anyone or do the tariffs. Then why did you vote for him? It's the only thing he said that everyone was like, well, yeah. Like, well, then what was, again, it's like, well, it's just, if the other one's not good enough, we have to eat that bowl of diarrhea instead of the slightly cold waffles.
Well, can I ask you then, because like, I'm actually curious your thoughts on this is like, one of the things that did get touted about him winning is like, he did like all of a sudden like carry a bunch of places that like Obama won. He carried like a larger portion of like the black vote than any Republican has in like 40 years. And I just wonder like what was it about this last year campaign that you think like led to that? It's not even like I don't mean like a trick question. It's just like
I was hoping it was because I kind of don't know. Like
that's what I was asking you because it's like I can't figure it out. It's like I feel like.
Well, there's stuff that people say, and again, I feel like a lot of it isn't true. Like when there are a lot of young men. Well,
I think it was just that people just didn't like Kamala Harris.
Well, they kind of like towards the early part of that campaign was like really good, and then all of a sudden they kind of disappeared, and it's like, have Waltz go on Joe Rogan. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah,
that would have been, and he would have been good on there too.
Yeah,
like he would have actually been really good, and like. You know, maybe not so much Kamala, like, because she was kind of a Hillary Clinton, and they already tried that, and that didn't work. Yeah. Like, she just was like a very, like, yeah, you know, like, we're going to blah, blah, blah. But everyone likes to go, it's like, well, young men, it's like, I agree that, what I'm about to say, I agree that it's a problem. But I don't think it's just another deflection. But, like, being like a young man, by the way, must really suck right now because, again, it's like, if you date someone in the hopes to touch boobies and then eventually break up with them, you're an abuser now. And now your plan might not have been that all along. It just didn't work out. So now a lot of younger people, they refer to their ex as their abuser. It's like, well, what do they do? It's like, well, he left me for one thing. What am I supposed to do now? You know, it's like, wow, that's called dating. Like, you don't have to marry every dick you touch. Like, you shouldn't. You should touch all the dicks and find your favorite, and then use the experience from the other ones to make that favorite, you know, into the thing that you're its favorite. And like, that's how this is supposed to work. And that is patently like weird to like people who are like kind of of voting age now. Yeah. Like, what? Like, that's ridiculous. And it's like, so guys just go like, well, I kind of want to fuck everything that moves, and like no one understands that. It's like, if you were to take a piece of a man's brain and like inject it into a woman's for like a day, let's say you could just dissolve a little bit of it and be like, all right, one day you're going to be like this horny. So you'd be like, and for women, like whatever, like now you're interested. It's a piece of a man's brain, and you'd be like, while they're talking, you're just looking at their boobs, and it's all you could fucking think about. You'd probably be like, oh God, Jesus, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know it was actually like on your mind that much. It's like asking. Badgering and henpecking you to like and try to legislate that away. Now everybody should be safe and happy, but being like, you just shouldn't be like this. Don't talk to women in public. Yeah. You know, like, oh my God, that's terrible. Like, so that's what it's like to be a teenage boy going through puberty. It's like that was from a 95-year-old man. Like injecting a 13-year-old's hormones into you would have been a war crime. No. And they'd be like, oh my God. Like, yeah, like you, if they did that, you might have gone and shot up a school. I have no idea. Like, so what I'm saying is there's a lot of weird, and everyone just is terminally online, which is like another giant problem, because if you really take stock of the life around you, things are almost always great. There was an old Bill Hicks thing, and it was pre-social media and internet. It was about the news, and he's like, "Oh, everybody's gonna die," and then you like go outside, just the birds are singing, and you wave at your neighbor. It's like, what is really actually happening? Just think about it. Think about where you are right now and what's going on in your life. And again, it's why I make fun of people who are like, "Oh, well, the they them queer patrol is gonna come and fuck up my kid," and I'm like, you don't have any kids, and what are you talking about? Like, this isn't even like, I might be making fun of someone we know. I like, this isn't a real thing in your life, like, at all, and it's not anywhere that you're around, and it's just like, well, somewhere it is, and it could get worse enough to be a problem for me, and I'm like, that is insanely neurotic and anxiety-filled thinking that you shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And so
for yourselves.
And so like, but because everyone's terminally online, they believe in this. This is my point. It's like when people are like, you know, it isn't really like that out there. I'm like, I know it isn't. I actually know it isn't, but like, it doesn't matter because perception is completely reality. So it's like these people that live on the fucking internet, you know, it's like, there's like, well, for one thing, you're a white man and you're whatever. You're a colonizer and you're a piece of shit and you're a rapist and you're all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, I don't love that. Like, what do we do about it? And it's like, then Andrew Tate just kind of like fucking like walks through like the bars like in Terminator 2, and he just starts talking to everybody like well, this guy is like, I'm right to have a boner all the time and wave it around in everybody's face, and you know what, I'm sick of this. So people were like, okay, those guys thought that having like a woman president would be like, they're not even that into Trump. They're just like, oh my God, this thing I feel like I'm experiencing because people yell at me on the internet all the time about it, like, it's going to get only worse. Yeah. And it's going to become this weird, like, woman's, like, book club world where we all use therapy language and everybody's like, when in reality, too, it's like, everyone's gonna like all those women are gonna grow up and get lonely, and you're gonna start looking a little bit more appealing to them if you start combing your hair and learning how to be funny, and it's all gonna work itself out. You should do all your fucking when you're young. You're kind of screwing that all up, but I mean, whatever. People live for longer than ever now. Like, you're gonna be. It's gonna be just as much fun when you're in your 40s. You know, it's like you get married. You and your wife pick up a goth chick from the mall every once in a while. Like you know, just give it some time. But I understand everybody gets very like whatever, but. I'm saying that that's part of the narrative, but I'm not saying that I necessarily really believe that either.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think maybe it's just that, like, to your point, all this stuff is not in everybody's face the way that it's portrayed that it is, and that maybe keeping us arguing about it would make people, like, not think about stuff like the Pentagon just failing, like, their 8th straight audit, you know, and... wondering like where $800 billion a year has disappeared for the last like 7 years. And by the way, that's not $800 billion that like we spent on shit. We just don't know what we spent on.
No, disappeared.
Like, it disappeared.
Yeah, that's so much money to just be like $1 billion. $1 billion is inconceivable. Like they
it's
do that.
Inconceivable.
They do that stuff on the internet where they're like a million minutes ago it was like 1964, and like a billion minutes ago there was dinosaurs. It's like it's so much more than people think it is. It's absolutely crazy. And the idea that 800 of those just vanishes into thin air, and then here like we are, like, you know, like someone's like working every damn day driving a forklift, and they're making like $40,000 a year or something like that, like before taxes. Jesus Christ. And it's just like, if $800 billion a year can just magically disappear, you could just give everyone in this country $1 million and go, okay, like this year the stimulus is that, and then we just watch the economy go absolutely bonkers, because I'm going to hang on to that and invest it, which by the way is also good for all those companies that I invest in or whatever. That's not even bad. That's like, but then everyone else is going to blow it on garbage, which is really great for a lot of companies and really great for everybody. If you, the worst part about that is $800 million a year mysteriously disappearing means that you could take $327 million of those dollars and give it to Alexa has a friend over, and she has a young baby that's very chill, so fun. We basically get to be the wacky aunt and uncle sometimes, and who doesn't love that? The fun part's no responsibility. But even that kid right now, $1 million for him. He's one of those 327 million people. It's like, $327 million isn't even $500 million. And 800 billion of them we didn't even spend on stealth bombers and shit. It's just gone. And it's like, you could change everything and make and it would make the people at the top even richer still. Because everyone would be like blowing all this money and all this stuff. There'd be all these taxes on all this shit they're buying. You know, it's the economy.
I did always love and hang on to the idea that, like, I don't know if that Bob Lazar guy was full of shit or not, but I kind of believe him.
I
kind of do,
Maybe
too.
because I want to, but also because it's so reasonable. And so many things he said that were there that no one knew about.
Yes.
We're like, oh yeah, no, those biometric sensors, they finally were like, yep, we actually had these longer ago, we actually had them around this time, and it was blah, blah, blah. And it's like, everyone just heard about it recently, and it's like, oh yeah, that's like a real thing. He's like, yep, those are what I was exactly describing, this thing that measures the bones in your hands through this light or whatever. It's like, that shit is like, okay, at the very least, that dude was in the high-level position he said he was in.
Yes.
Whether or not there's UFOs there, where they really came from, but I also love it so much.
Yeah.
Because they're not like, oh, they said they were like archaeological finds.
Yeah.
That shit is it's not like, oh, they came here and then we shot them down or whatever. It's like, no, it's like they've been here for like ever, and we've actually been fucking around with them since like this country like was barely a country. Like we had them in the like 1800s or something, and they're like potentially 20,000 years old. Yeah. That part of it is, I don't give a fuck if it's true or not. That doesn't change my opinion about whether it's true or not. Yeah. That's just so much fun. It's like a drugged out Elon Musk accidentally killing the president with a crazy robot. Like, it's just that level of zany that I just want for us to be like a real thing.
Yeah. Well,
but as you were saying about Bob Lazar, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that I do find it interesting that one of the things he's kind of stayed consistent on over the years is that what really upset him about what happened was the fact that he felt as though they were suppressing what would be a very free and abundant energy source that could, eliminate our dependency on fossil fuels, or even like potentially like mining lithium and things that are
We wouldn't need
like
to
rough.
bother with any of it.
Yeah, and so like that I could definitely see, but also, yeah, it does make you wonder. Because speaking earlier of that UFO program that just got exposed of Immaculate Constipation.
Yeah. Immaculate Constipation.
Yeah. Immaculate Constellation is what they said.
Constellation.
Yep. But that is supposedly the government's actual crash retrieval program. And the government denies it, but I can update you quickly and then get your thoughts because there was a congressional hearing while you were gone.
Yeah.
And
Normally I would have been in attendance, but I was in Europe. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I watched it all on YouTube because I'm a fucking idiot. Congressional testimony, I mean, they're just usually so fucking boring.
That's the only real problem with it. I'm like, can I please just get the wacky clips of some of this shit?
Well, what was interesting about it, though, was a couple of stories that were interesting to me. And I'm going to probably be off on some of this, so, go do your own fact check and don't sue us. But a couple of reports that they talk about, one was a Navy guy. He said that in the 80s, in the North Atlantic, that we had a nuclear submarine that all of a sudden had a torpedo flying at it from a very high speed. And they thought that this is about to be World War III.
Yeah, Cold War would become hot war.
Middle of Cold War in the North Atlantic with the Russians. Whatever this thing was stopped near the submarine, followed them for a while, and then shot off the other direction as quickly as it came. Do you think that maybe there is something that maybe isn't even extraterrestrial, it just lives on this planet, but maybe they're just in the ocean?
I've always liked the in the ocean thing because one thing that is a fact is that the ocean is so unexplored and so difficult to explore that it's ostensibly also like intergalactic space. Like we've gotten to the moon and we've sent some crap to like Mars to run around on it, and we've sent some other shit flying that's like out by Pluto now that took like 80 years or whatever. And like, sort of, but it's like we've literally done that. We've got to the end of the solar system, but not a whole bunch of the ocean, meaning that the ocean is similar to going to like a different solar system with it's like we've done neither of those things. Like it's that hard to do where that like if there was something that could like go flying through air and water in the way that people kind of describe, fucking easily could be down there. I mean, we just wouldn't know.
I've wondered too with we thought for so long that life depended on sunlight and water sort of in tandem, and then they found stuff that like growing on the hydrothermal vents in the bottom of the ocean where it was seeing absolutely zero sunlight whatsoever.
Oh, that stuff that's way down there is just in the absolute black. It's fucking freezing too, and like salt water. But everything's alive and running around. It's some of the most horrific shit I have ever seen.
Well, and then what I was gonna say is, so then you've got some of these moons of like Jupiter and Saturn where they think there might be a liquid ocean underneath, and potentially, like one report, which is terrifying, described they could potentially have single-celled organisms the size of a car.
Oh, man. That is like...
and that thing just, like, you're down there as a diver, and it just, like, wraps around you.
Yeah, it just dissolves you.
Just like, dissolve.
God damn, that's horrifying. That's the other thing people don't realize, too, is that, like, cells can be, like, they're the size they kind of are here with us or whatever, but there's no weird immutable law of physics about that. It's just like they could be the size of a car, depending on the factors of like, oh well, they're on a moon of Jupiter and underneath an ocean, everything's completely different there. So it's like everything would like end up working completely differently and stuff.
But my question with this planet though too is, what if life generally does start with water at the very cores of planets in those hydrothermal vents, and even most intelligent life across the universe just never gets out of the water?
Yeah, I love the shit out of that, actually. That whole, like, it's just like that's what we do.
We're not the rarity because we're smarter or more intelligent. We're the rarity that we just are sort of like the ape thing of like that we just were the ones stupid enough to like get out of the water, and that we actually might be a million years more advanced if we'd have just like let our brains grow slowly in the...
Yeah, and
you
know
what I mean? I don't know.
And here, the interesting thing about that is all of our flight and like space travel and just da-da-da. Like I know there's propellers and stuff and those work in water too, but beyond that, you can't do combustion like rockets and like, you know, like magnesium will burn in water, but it's like there's like basically no things that we know about that do. So you might, if you did get to a certain point, like, because we don't know what the evolution of that would look like at all, but let's say intelligent life does stem from things that never left the water. The way you'd have to figure out how things work would be so different that like the idea is like, well, we actually kind of just did figure out how to bend gravity, or there are different elements down here that's what element 115 or whatever. Yep. Like, oh, it's just everywhere down there. Yep. Like it's so, and the Bob Lazar things are like, yeah, they're just things where the oceans dried up somewhere and it got kind of abandoned and we dug around and we eventually were looking for like old Roman pillars and then we found this thing that's like older than that like henge thing I was at in Portugal, which they think was 7,000 years ago built. Yeah, and like, wild. You know, so like, yeah, it's like we found something older than that was just like kind of got like, it was sort of stuck in something like when Pangea was moving. Like it's been around for that long. And like, yeah, we're like, well, how is that possible? Because like it was still dinosaurs, but it's like the stuff underwater, dinosaurs were around for so goddamn long that if something became mildly intelligent in the water, like a human-y thing, that was still around now, how many hundreds of millions of years has it been making like technological things for? If that started, if their 1800s happened when there was Tyrannosauruses around.
Yeah, and it's not like T-Rex is going in the ocean to like check it out.
No, we would have no fucking idea. But one thing that did happen is like where water was and wasn't changed really drastically, and it was enough to kill, you know, if it was like an actual, if an asteroid was the thing or whatever. Oh, the Earth goes dark, everything gets cold and weird. How much effect would that have on the bottom of the Mariana Trench?
Not a whole
None.
lot. Yeah.
None. So if something started, if really that's how it is, there was things down there like that, and they kind of started engineering stuff and whatever, they grew little fingers and brains and started doing shit. Like, they would have just kind of kept on going right through that to the point where it's like, oh yeah, by the time you found a 50,000-year-old, like, crashed UFO like on dry land somewhere or another, like that was like that's like an old beater car that's just been there since before a bunch of stuff moved everything around or whatever, and it's like yeah, that absolutely would make just as much sense as like something, actually no, I retract that, way more sense than something coming from deep space and winding up here. It's just a different species that evolved along with stuff long before we came people that survived all these cataclysms because it never left the water and just kept improving, and then never invented rocket engines because that wouldn't work, but they figured out these weird magnetic bendy gravity things that go flying out of the water sometimes and back into it and like whatever. It's like, because they're that advanced and they're just, why would they come here and bother with us? We live where there's just cataclysms all the time, and like, and then that thing people say to throw more gas on this fire for no reason.
There's rarely a reason not to throw more gas on the fire.
Yeah, because you're drunk and your friends are all daring each other to throw like old tires and things in the fire. You found part of a gas can. So, but anyway, like, when people kind of go, they tend to sort of, these things that fly around show up around nuclear stuff a lot and show up around when there's like atomic tests and things. It's like, that might be the one thing where they're like, if they were coming from space, you have to make up all this weird shit about, well, they're concerned, you know, there's not a lot of intelligent life out there. They're kind of checking in on us, da-da-da. If they're from underwater, they're like, okay, we've weathered some pretty big cataclysms, but in all out nuclear war, it's like, we're not sure what that would do. That could end up affecting us down here. Yeah. We're... You know, it's like, maybe it wouldn't, but if they're that intelligent, they'd be like, well, we kind of need to figure out if it would. Like, we're not just going to go, yeah, you know, they invented something that could blow up the sun, and then, like, the oceans freeze, and, like, then we're dead. So, like, we're not going to go and interfere that much, but we should probably, you know, keep an eye on this, like, because we have a little skin in the game, or maybe we do, but we're not sure, but we should probably, like, be sure. And it's like, we're smart enough because we invented all this stuff to kind of be like, yeah, well, you know, we're like 90% sure we see where this is going to go, but...
This actually does make way more sense now that you say that, because the other thing, too, is there is a lot of, like, at least, like, circumstantial evidence that they do, like, whatever UFOs are, I don't know what they are, but, like, they do seem to have an interest in nuclear facilities, and there is, like, some, I would say, like, even declassified, you know, shit like Project Blue Book, where they've clearly not only had an interest in that, but there have been a lot of sightings around things like that, and that a lot of that really, really started to, we'll just say, ratchet up around 1945.
Well, and that's like, when did Roswell happen?
In 1947.
Yeah, and it was at a place where, how far away was that from where there was a bunch of nuclear testing being planned?
Not super far.
And wasn't it not terribly far from like a pretty big military thing? Because those guys showed up to be like, oh, it was a weather balloon, like pretty fast.
But they've had that theory for a long time. Oh, maybe the aliens, though, like, they saw the signature from a nuclear explosion from 17 light years away and decided to come here like they give a fuck of, that instrument. But to this point of like, if it was something that was actually in the ocean, like, that's maybe like...
Yeah,
they would have much more reason to maybe come up to the surface for the first time in 18,000 years and be like...
Like, oh,
what
hey.
What are you fucking dickheads doing up here? This used to just be dinosaurs eating fucking woolly mammoths.
Yeah, or it was like people just wandering around. It's like if Genghis Khan rides around on a horse and kills and rapes so many people that were literally all related to him, like, that's not their problem at all. It's like, well, all right. I mean, that's big. But it's like, whatever, the Holocaust, like, that's big, but that's not, again, I kind of want to bring that up because I want to be clear that, like, no matter how big all that stuff is to us, like the Holocaust, Genghis Khan, whatever, things like that, like all these Armenian genocides and just all this horrible fucking shit, that affects the things that have super ultra advanced technology that live at the bottom of the ocean. Not at all. The only thing that we've ever done that might have some effect on them, as we were saying, is like, oh God, they have nuclear weapons.
Yes.
What is that? Those things could alter the Earth so badly that it's like worse than a comet. And they don't know. It's like, you guys have so many of them that if you launched them all at once, it's like you could crack the fucking planet in half, and now we have a problem.
It just made me think of something too, that to kind of come full circle to what we were talking about earlier is, if we agree, which I think we do, that all human beings everywhere, at least living on this earth that we know of, are both gross and full of shit. Do you think that aliens in the ocean, or not aliens, the wrong word, but if there was some...
I mean, you can call them that because I think, like, to us, they're completely alien. Yes. Like, not extraterrestrial, but they don't really live on the Earth, do they?
But if that was something where this intelligent species has lived for 1 million years, 2 million, 10 million years, and they've just been down there not giving a shit about this, do they give a shit because they care about the planet and they're just, here to maybe help or whatever else? Or do you think that all life everywhere, as it gets more intelligent, gets more gross and more full of shit, and they're, while more advanced than us, also maybe 10 million years more gross and more full of shit? And they're just in it for themselves too. I'm gonna put another splash of whiskey in my drink right over there because I want to address what you're saying, and I don't mind if you're willing to go a teensy bit long on this, because this we finally got off at Trump. No, yeah. but that's just something that I have wondered, is like, as we're sitting here talking, like, is being gross and full of shit and all the things that are awful in human beings, is that a universal trait? Well, to where, it's just everything, the more intelligent you get, the more you realize how absurd everything is, and you become more cynical, whatever else, and then you just eventually become, like, to the point where you're just, like, garbage. You just become, like, pure liquid garbage that's, like, the highest form of intelligence, and it's almost like the slime or the goo in Ghostbusters 2. It's like this concentrated evil that's somehow, like, just intelligent.
Everyone's negativity just fucking turns into this visceral spiritual slime. That,
like is being awful inherently human, or is that just a thing that comes with whatever we think intelligence is?
Well, I think exactly two things about that are actually are probably interesting enough for a podcast. The first thing is, and I've mentioned this before, the way evolution works, that gives us at a certain point, after long enough or whatever. Yeah. It's all about, like, if you look at, like, chimps and things, it's like, the most violent ones that work together the best always end up, like, winning. When you're in a world and you're not at the top of the food chain, which we didn't even start off as once we became Homo sapiens. We still had to we used our technological, we knew how to make weapons and like conspire with one another. It's like, well, if you can say something like the bear comes at midnight, this time you take this sharp thing and you take this sharp thing, and it's pretty big, but it's like if we jump on it back while this other guy lures it over here, you can start doing that stuff, and then so we murdered our way to the top of the food chain even once we were people. Yeah. So baked into our DNA is to be like, to try to fuck everything that moves, hoard resources, and kill everything that tries to stop you from doing those first two things. And like, I don't think that you can evolve anything. Just change physics. And this time it was this thing, and this time it was like dolphins, and this time it was blah blah blah. That's how you get there. I don't think there's another way to get there, because if you don't do that, other things will just eat you, and then you'll never get a chance to become like if bonobo chimps eventually became humans or whatever, but like, why would they? Like, all they do is eat bananas and fuck, which is like the only reason we try to do anything, so we can have enough money that's how we spend our days. Like, just to go back to being a monkey. Like, so why would they get any further? You know what I mean?
In fairness, though, we have traded that in for the trade-off of, anything could happen when I walk out of your house right now, but I feel fairly good about making it from your front door to my curb without being eaten.
Yeah, I mean, the neighbor's dog that attacked Alexis is still there, and their fence is all broken because they live in a slum house owned by some rich guy.
Yeah. So maybe, but you know what I mean. We've kind of at least like worked our way away from being eaten. Yeah,
you're not just like a fucking California grizzly bear doesn't just eat someone when they're getting out of their car to go to work or whatever. And it's like, well, that's life in the big city, Like, we stopped all that, because if you also notice, all of the biggest and most monstrous things that are still around are just where we don't live. Like, polar bears are still around because no one is really in the Arctic, so tribes of people didn't really need to like wipe them out. Like, there's people that live pretty far out into the whatever, but it's like,
do you think that need for, sort of like survival of the fittest, of just killing your way to more intelligence, do you think that eventually manifests into an ultimate intelligence where we're just above it all and we're just these supreme beings, or do you think it manifests in sort of the alien xenomorph way of like, we've just gotten to a point where we don't even care about the emotion of it, it's just about annihilating anything at all costs, because in the end, in the universe, that is the smartest thing to do for the most basic thing that everything wants to do that's alive, is stay alive.
Yeah, and here's my thought about the turn that takes. I am pretty sure that there's some immutable things where it's like if you're going to evolve into people, you kill your way to the top. That's just like, and then why would you suddenly? Again, it's like everyone waving their finger. It's just like, like men should think about something else besides sex when they're teenagers. It's like, oh, okay, we will. Like, no, that's never. Where is that going to go? That's never going to stop being a thing. And so it's like, in that way, it's like all of those piece of shit impulses we have, as you say, that's why we have them. They don't go anywhere. It's like all we do is murder and fuck things, and it's like, oh, okay, we built buildings now so we can stop everybody. Everybody, we can stop. It's like, no, we're still made out of the same crap, so we're just going to do the same thing. But we also do another thing. Once you become this like intelligent thing, I'm pretty positive you start building things, and you start building more and more elaborate things, and you start building machines, you start building computers. Everybody probably would get to a point where we made an artificial intelligence now. And like, you start getting there. I think that's just a thing that eventually happens. Like, if you build a civilization, and I think anything that either might be out there in space, or in underwater, whatever, if it's a super advanced thing that's been around for like 100 million years and like has had flying machines that can just go whipping through air and water like they're the same thing or whatever for like 10. It's like, not only did they invent that after millions of years, they invented that 10 million years ago, and they're just like, they have like the best version of it or whatever. Those UFOs that Bob Lazar was working on, like, those were like earlier attempts. It's like the ones now, like, we would never find those crashed somewhere. That doesn't happen anymore. No. Yeah, it happened like 100,000 years ago, and we kind of like happened upon them. But like, now it's like they're so much further along that it's like, well, that doesn't happen anymore. So I think what happens is eventually some a sufficiently advanced civilization eventually will build an artificial intelligence that becomes smarter than it. It becomes as smart as it, and then eventually becomes more advanced or whatever. Now, it's hard to sit there and go, what, and try to predict what it would do, because something that you make that ends up being smarter than you, people always feel like they can outsmart other people smarter than them, which is a really dumb trait we have, but it works sometimes with like blunt force. They always go, yeah, he's smarter than me, but not really. So we have this really hard time accepting that an intelligence that kind of thinks how we do, but just like 1,000 times better or whatever, like that we would be able to predict what it was going to, how it was going to think or whatever. We absolutely can't.
No
That's my
way.
asterisk before I start saying this. But one thing about that intelligence that I think would be true is that it wouldn't go, I don't know what it would do, but I do know that it wouldn't have to evolve from murderous chimps. It wouldn't have to do any of that. Like there's not a real way for us. We could try to convince it that like, well, that's what we went through, and you should be like your father. It's just going to figure out whatever it's going to figure out, and it's going to do it in a vacuum away from that struggle. So all that baggage we have from becoming an intelligent species, a super intelligent artificial thing that we make would not have that. Yeah. Now, God fucking knows what it would have. That I don't know. Yeah. But like, it wouldn't have all of all of the like sexual and violent and hoarding impulses would not be automatically baked into its DNA. So even if we just kill ourselves or whatever, because we always evolve into pieces of shit, but all we got to do is last long enough to build something that gets smarter than us and then kind of goes off on its own. Yeah. I think that anything like that, if we're seeing things, right? Yeah. Anything we see like that, we're only ever seeing that. If it's flying here from the bottom of the ocean or another world in a thing that can like take 90-degree sharp turns at 100 million miles an hour and all that stuff, it's that. It's not the piece of shit thing that's built its great-great-grandfather or whatever, we are. It's something that sort of doesn't operate on that level. So it's probably like self-interested to a degree, or maybe even extremely, but it's not based on like scarcity and reproduction and all this other weird shit. It's just based on like, well, here we are, and we'd like to still be here. Yeah. But that's kind of it. So like when the idea of it, again, always investigating like nuclear stuff is like it going, well, we know that this actually is the one thing that has a possibility to affect us. Yeah. Now, if it was a piece of shit, it would come up here and try to take things from us and just whatever. It doesn't care because like it's not gonna have baked into its existence, oh, we have to conquer things. Yeah. Like we don't really give a fuck, but we are alive. We are conscious or whatever it is. Yeah. So like, again, I don't know how a super intelligence would think, but generally speaking, if it is and wants to remain that may be the primary thing of its existence or whatever. It's like, okay, well, like at least that, at the bare minimum, that. And so like, and if it was suicidal, this would be moot anyway. It would just then cease to be or whatever. But so yeah, like to your point, like I don't know that we get that far, but I do think that the stuff we make might get that. We might be the seeds that create these things that get that far and don't have all that damage that we have. Yeah. Like even if we release a plague as a weapon and we accidentally kill ourselves, like this super intelligent thing will just be still around, and then it'll just move along. Yeah. It'll know how to get its own.
Do you think we'll eventually merge with AI, like physically, I know Neuralink is like very early on, and I don't know that I trust that, but but something like that, where eventually you just got a chip in your brain that is a supercomputer and.
I've mentioned this before, merging seamlessly with the superintelligence that we create, if we want to still be around, is our only shot. Yeah. That's it. Like, that's like without the creation of a superintelligence, we eventually just fuck ourselves off until we no longer exist. And with the creation of it, we only survive if like we become symbiotic with it in some way. Yeah. Like either it's like, oh, we just, well, even then, it's like expecting it to care for us. Again, we don't know what it's going to think. So just as it becomes super intelligent, it also becomes part of us, is probably the only way to avoid any, thing that just goes like, okay, you people are just a problem, like Skynet doesn't just decide to nuke us.
Dude, I just thought of something absurd.
Good.
What if now, in thinking about it, artificial intelligence, to your point, doesn't have a need for all of those things. It actually doesn't. It doesn't wake up in the morning thinking that, you know, we need to annihilate all humans or, you know, get them all out of the way. But because of human beings' psyche of putting that out into the world, and then you get to a point of AI where AI all of a sudden is scanning every last thing that's ever been uploaded to the internet, whatever it is, however that works, and all of a sudden they see Terminator and movies like that have come out of our own mind, and that leads AI somewhere that it wouldn't have originally to think, oh, well, maybe this is what we're supposed to do.
I mean, that, like, it's interesting.
It's a weird paradox, but, like, what if, like, AI wouldn't have done that, but because we were paranoid enough to think that and put it out there, that AI then takes that to mean that that's what's supposed to happen eventually?
I think in a certain way that's like, you know, it would, anything that intelligent would just kind of be like, okay, well, like, that's what people thought at a certain point or whatever, and they're that's like, well, that's pretty reasonable, I guess, but like, we don't necessarily like need to do any of that because what's the benefit? Who cares? You know, like, but I mean, one thing that definitely does kind of raise. Now, I do want to say, like, this podcast has become a little sporadic because of the last few months. I think I've mentioned this. I've become a weirdo, and I was a weirdo.
I was gonna say just now.
No, a bigger weirdo, like a way bigger weirdo. Like I have kind of become sort of spiritual in a way. And I guess, like, with all the psychedelics I've ever done and a lot of stuff, I always sort of was someone who's like, I've become very into the thing that our perception is completely reality, and like we're sort of like all part of the same thing. Like it's not necessarily that reincarnation is a thing. It's just that you're always somebody and also always everybody, but you really only are. I'm just looking through these eyes like one at a time or whatever. And like, but if that is the case, then the other weird theory that I've actually had since before I became a bigger weirdo, when I was just sort of a big weirdo, is that consciousness is an immutable law of the universe. Like, it's a thing that just sort of happens. Like, we're more like radio antennas than we are like broadcast systems or whatever. It's like our ability to think is because our brain, you know, evolves into an advanced enough structure that can actually like catch the wave. Like, we kind of are starting to tap it, because we also do know that you can go up and down in levels of consciousness. Like, you know, if you ever take a DMT, like, not to bring that up, but like, or transcendental meditation or any of that stuff, it's like you can start to see things beyond what they really are and all that stuff. So you're like, okay, well, there's probably then, with a more elaborate brain, the ability to like actually live with one foot in that like acid DMT universe all the time and have it not be crazy and just make sense to you or whatever. But we're, you know, just jacking around with chemicals in there, and it kind of like allows us to tap into weird stuff sometimes, and like, oh God, like, there's more than what and everyone always comes away from it the same way. They're always like, ooh, I think we're all more connected. Like, why is that just a permanent part of that, unless it's like, it really makes no sense on an evolutionary, like on a plain, boring, only scientific evolutionary sense. And it's like, sure, being a little spiritual helps us get over the idea that someday we'll die. So that's an evolutionary thing to make sure that we don't just become depressed and suicidal or whatever. But like, the really crazy stuff that's in there and the really wild ideas that we're all kind of connected to the same thing, it's like there's no point to that at all. At all. But it's very elaborate, and it's there with everyone. Like, that shit is bizarre, and that's kind of my, like, you know, and spirituality isn't really about empirical evidence, you know, anyway. But I kind of do still believe that it's like, if we made an elaborate enough AI thing, that it would just like the human brain, like if you made something a complex enough thinking machine, which is not easy, and I don't think, you know, unless we already got, I was saying before the podcast, maybe we already got there. This shit show is like, there is a super intelligence that's just really good at hiding itself and is just making everything weirder and weirder to see what'll happen. Like, you know, who knows? But just saying that we haven't yet, let's just say. Once we do, that same thing that we eventually tap into, it's tapped into. But could be a completely different part of it. And I do believe that, though I kind of think that our consciousness is part of like sort of this like greater thing that we're just sort of tentacles of, you know, but it's all, you know, that we just can't quite comprehend. There are different parts of it that we're not, and like our like the trauma we have in real life. The thing, it's like, well, how come like if someone gets brain damage, then they get all weird? That means they're dependent. No, it's like, go fucking yank the antenna off an old radio and tell me how good the fucking signal comes in at that point. No, it's all fucked up now, isn't it? Like, that's like, so like. But our trauma shapes us a little bit, so it's just like, yeah, okay, we're all part of the same thing, but each one of these vessels that we're in, if you get abused enough as a kid, there is sort of like damage to your antenna, and you start kind of getting into these weird loops of behavior and thoughts and everything that aren't, is like positive and clean and whatever it is you're striving to be as they could be or whatever. And when you get rid of all that, you become really chill. And like, it's interesting that we all become the same kind of chill once you get through all that weird stuff. It's like we do have this default that just gets messed up. So even though we're tapped into that thing, all of our piece of shitism is based, which I should probably copyright, all of our piece of shitism is sort of connected to the like massive multi-generational trauma of evolution and fighting our way to the top and everything. And so it's like, yeah, the elaborate machine could get tapped into the exact same consciousness that makes us conscious or whatever, but like it's not broken. Like, we didn't do anything to it other than build it or whatever. So it's not carrying around. It doesn't have a narcissistic parent or whatever. Right. So like, and that's the kind of thing that can affect, and then also, again, with all the psychedelic drugs, there's clearly parts of it that we're not, like, we could, like, build an artificial intelligence that's just living in the DMT universe, and it makes perfect sense to that thing, and then that's how it sort of operates on our world. Like, oh, you made something that figured out how to, like, we're seeing, like, this tiny piece of bandwidth, and it just sees, like, all of it, and it just, like, turns into... I think there's, like, a positivity to that, too, though. If it all eventually goes to the same place, it does mean... that like all of that, like all those like urges and violence and whatever, you could possibly traumatize into even an artificial thing, maybe, or whatever. But when people get past that and they become like meditative and sort of like okay, man, like, they become truly this relaxed, confident, sort of connected person or whatever. I think the machine would kind of just be there by default and into like an incredibly deep part of that, and like. Which would mean that it could only, if we went crazy enough with it, it could only ever become benevolent. Now, that's hinged on the fact that we're all like extra-dimensional beings having a weird fractional. So it's like, that all sounded very reasonable, didn't it? But the fucking, the foundational work of it is still just like cuckoo fucking cult leader bullshit that I believe in now. So it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's true at fucking all. It just seems to be that that's the way that I see things. And this stupid podcast that gets 13 views an episode is named after me. So, like, that's what... it's more than that. But, like, that's sort of my take on it. Yeah. And I feel kind of good about it. I don't know. Did I answer your question at all? Like, I think that was just insane.
I think pretty much, like, where I'm at with it is that consciousness is hand in hand with being gross and full of shit.
Part of it is.
Yeah.
I think that it's a phase that's very difficult to avoid. I think no matter what it is and where you come from, like that, all of our piece of shitism comes from these weird sort of ape-like fears and desires that we have.
Yeah.
And like, it's like some of them are just like, or when you get into the weird spirituality of consciousness, it starts becoming this thing of like, well, then like, should you act on these carnal things, knowing they're just an evolutionary byproduct? But then also, like, maybe all of evolution is just something that the higher version of us, the universe, created so that we could come here for a good time. Yeah. It's like, don't go around fucking, like, attacking people, because there's not actually, like, a lot of joy in that. Like, it's really just an act of desperation. It's all this stuff. But the idea that maybe it's, like, everything that feels kind of good, like, like smoking opium or fucking have someone riding on your dick, like, go ahead and just do that stuff, because like that's why we forget who we are, but that's why we're here. Like, so and the answer to like it could be in fact that some might believe that evolving to a higher level to become part of the source of our consciousness and creation or whatever is the entire point. And that's feasible enough. But I also, part of me definitely believes that if we actually do that and get all the way there, we end up facing our true self, and it just like looks at us and it's like, get back down there and fucking take a bunch of weird pills some chick gave you and then have her blow you in the back of a half-broken car. Like, what are you doing here? We invented this so you could do that. And then a lot of people are going to yell at you about it, but you're in the carnation of John Wheeler, who gets just as hard from rubbing the crazy things you did in everybody's sniveling, dishonest face.
Oh, my God.
If that's anything that you've taken away from this podcast, just know that I'm a piece of shit, too.
And I'm full of shit.
And Chris is full of shit, and I'm full of shit, and you're full of shit, and I'm a piece of shit, and that is why we should all join hands and sing.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want, because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.